So now that we've developed this framework of envisioning the entrepreneurial process, I want to introduce the concepts of risk and value. So as we think about risk and value, when you're in the early stages, let's say you came to me as an investor and you said, Professor, I have this great idea for a new kind of a dog leash that's going to help you train dogs while you're out there walking them, and I think that this is the greatest new thing. And if you come to me when it's a early stage concept and you say, Professor, all I need is a $100,000 investment from you, and we'll be able to take this new invention and we'll be able to bring it into the market, and the market will beat a path to our door. I say, okay, let's assume that I like the idea. Now we have to negotiate. And so the question then becomes, if you want me to give you $100,000 so that you can get started on this particular business venture, get started on this path, if I give you that $100,000, what are you giving me in return? Well, what you give me in return is a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper is going to be written a number, expressed as a percentage of ownership in your company. And so if I said to you, I'll write you that $100,000 check so that you can develop your new and innovative dog training leash, what number should we put on there? And you might say, well, maybe I'll give you 10%. And I'll say, 10%? Well, when you've got the idea and you say, yeah, it's my idea and I think that I can develop this thing and all I need is your money just so I can do this, how am I going to react to that? I'm going to need a lot more than 10%. And then I might come back to you, and because if we're back here, I might come back to you and say, well, I'll give you the $100,000 because I think that this could be something interesting, but I'm going to need something more on the magnitude of 90 or possibly even 95%. And as you get over your shock, we have to ask the question, am I acting irrationally when I say, when we're back here, am I acting irrationally when we say that I like the idea, but I'm going to need 95% of the business? And you're appalled by that as the entrepreneur. But let's look at it in the context of risk-value relationships, all right? And so if I gave you that $100,000 right here when you're in the concept stage, what am I saying? How much risk am I experiencing? High, medium, or low? Well, I think that any rational person would honestly believe that my risk is going to be somewhere up here. High risk. Why is risk so high? And value risk so high and value so low. Why is risk high and value low? Well, I can easily explain that in the context of the assumptions to knowledge ratio, okay? When your idea is nothing but assumptions with very little knowledge about how the market's going to behave, we have to assume that risk is going to be very high, because if I give you this $100,000 now, the chances of me losing that $100,000 is going to be very high. Why? Because of high assumptions to knowledge ratios, which mean that the value of your business back here is very low and probably close to nothing. And so my point to you, as you begin to navigate down this particular path going from concept to commercial ready venture. And you start overcoming some of these hurdles. You start overcoming some of these hurdles, okay? What does overcoming a hurdle mean? Well, over here, maybe you've solved a technical challenge that was a problem before. Or maybe you've proven that customers are, in fact, interested in this product. And maybe you've proven that a channel to the market, like a big box retailer, might be interested in doing business with you. If you're able to overcome some of these hurdles, what are you doing with respect to risk and valuation? Well, every time you overcome a hurdle like this and make a pivot or persevere decision, and if you're continuing down this path, you're overcoming obstacles. And as you overcome the obstacles, what tends to happen to the risk in the business? Risk in the business tends to start declining as the valuation in the business begins to start increasing. And so what we're looking at here in this very messy diagram that I'm showing you is the risk-value kinds of relationships. So early on, you have high assumptions, low knowledge, which means that you've got very high risk in losing financial investment because there's very low value. But as you begin to prove out your idea from a technical perspective, from a market perspective, from an organization design and channel perspective, from a people perspective, these are different kinds of risks that you have to overcome. And as you do that, you begin to start building momentum and credibility, and you have this situation here where value starts increasing and risk starts to decrease. So let's say instead of you being back here in the concept stage and wanting that $100,000 just to get started down this process, where if I'm the investor, I'm going to need 90 to 95% of your business because the risk is so high. But let's say instead of coming at me here from an investor perspective, let's say you're coming at me at this stage of the process. So you're saying, Professor, I need $100,000. I've developed a product. I've proven that there's a market out there. And we figured out some channel partners, and there's a path to the market. All I need is $100,000 right now so that I can build up some inventory and begin to starting to sell more aggressively in the marketplace. Well, in that case, what have you done to risk? When you're further on out here and you've proven a lot of these issues, what you've done is basically convert assumptions to knowledge. So when you convert assumptions to knowledge, you're lowering this ratio, which means that you're driving risk down and you're driving value up in the organization. And as you go through that process, so now we're out here and we're negotiating for that $100,000 and that piece of paper, but now the tables are turned. I would be lucky for $100,000 if you would consider giving me 10%, if I'm lucky, or that you would potentially give that to me, because you've taken so much risk out of this particular equation. So I want you to consider some lessons here as you go through your entrepreneurial process. You want to do it in a what I'll refer to, or what Eric Ries refers to as using a lean startup. A lean startup kind of a mentality, okay? Where early on, as you're trying to prove out your concept, you're trying to convert assumptions to knowledge, you want to do it with minimal financial investments that are maximizing your learning. So we want minimal investments to maximize over here your learning. And when you learn, the process is really referred to as converting assumptions to knowledge. And so what we're going to do in this course is through following a lean startup methodology, I want to introduce you to this concept of designed experimentation. I learned this concept from Steve Blank, designed experimentation. So what we're going to teach you in an entrepreneurship class is, as you begin to start going through this process and we begin to envision the kind of business model that you're ultimately going to be developing, we want to begin to start identifying assumptions that need to be tested in the marketplace. And with each of those critical assumptions that are trying to get you closer to commercial ready venture, we want to conduct designed experiments to test those assumptions. So we put smaller amounts of resources to test an assumption, get market feedback, and based on that market feedback, we make critical pivot or persevere kinds of decisions about our particular ideas. And this whole notion, a lean startup mentality using designed experimentation, is also referred to as evidence-based entrepreneurship. Evidence-based entrepreneurship. So the idea is, how can we maximize our learning by going through this process through minimal investments, through designed experimentation, gathering evidence from the market, and iterating and designing our business model to get closer to commercial ready venture.